Hello, Lauris and Pedro, GCSE PE students. I'm going to make you a little video now. As you all know, I love my own voice. And speaking about sports and exercise, so we're going to do a little introduction summary of all of the cardiovascular system. I've got some pretty horrific notes. I'm sure you're probably all missing my fantastic handwriting, and it seems to appear backwards actually. Anyway, so the topic is fairly straightforward and fairly simple, very, very similar to biology as well. So the first thing we need to look at or need to know is, what does the cardiovascular system do? First part, it transports things. The most important things it transports is firstly oxygen, as all working muscles need oxygen. So its job is to give oxygen to those working muscles that we can maintain to work aerobically. If we are working aerobically, it means that we can continue to work for a long period of time. It also transports CO2 or carbon dioxide, which it does that in the reverse, so it's getting rid of that waste product. Also things like lactic acid it will help get rid of. And finally, it will transport oxygen. The main way to think about blood is that, or the cardiovascular system, is that it is carrying everything the body needs at all times. So it's going to carry O2, it's going to get rid of CO2, and finally it's going to carry nutrients that we need. So if we've been working out, we need protein to recover the muscle or cells, it will carry that. If you need energy, which is from glucose is carried in the blood through the cardiovascular system. So one of its main objectives is to transport. And the next thing is to clot wounds through the platelets. So if you are bleeding, platelets will be carried through the blood and stop you bleeding out. And why is that important in sport? Which is the question we'll have to ask you. It's important in sport because if, for example, you're a boxer and you are bleeding, if you do not clot that wound, you'll have to stop the fight and you will lose. Same in football. Nowadays with the blood rule, if you are bleeding on the pitch, you have to come off the pitch and cannot return until you've stopped bleeding. So that's another important reason that we need to clot blood. And the cardiovascular system will also regulate body temperature. It'll do this through vasoconstriction and vasodilation. Two important things how it does that. So if we are hot, the blood vessels at the skin will vasodilate, so that blood heat can escape into the atmosphere, and vice versa. If you are cold, the extremities of the body, so the fingers, the toes, will vasoconstrict, and that is important because if they're vasoconstricted, it will maintain the blood to the core, to the heart, to the lungs, to the brain, and the important areas of our body, keeping the warmth in these areas, so that we can survive. Because essentially we can survive without fingers and toes, but we can't survive without brain function or heart function. And the next thing you need to be able to do is label the heart. Now again, you just have to do that for part of your homework. It's just a revision thing. It's just remembering what these different areas are. One of the main things to remember is that the aorta carries the blood through the whole body. The vena cava returns the blood. We've got the pulmonary artery and pulmonary vein. So arteries always carry oxygenated blood, apart from the pulmonary artery, which is carrying deoxygenated blood from the heart to the lungs. And we also have the pulmonary vein, which is the reverse. So veins normally carry deoxygenated blood back to the heart. However, the pulmonary vein is doing the reverse of that. It's bringing back oxygenated blood from the lungs to the heart. So it's called the pulmonary system or pulmonary circuit. And also in the heart, when you get a fit, strong heart, it's your left ventricle that will become the most muscularized, because the left ventricle has to pump blood to the whole body. The next section you need to know about is blood vessels. 3 blood vessels we have: arteries, capillaries, veins. Arteries, as I said before, carry pretty much always oxygenated blood, and they have thick walls. They have thick walls for a few reasons. Firstly, these thick walls are because it's working under high pressure. They've got to be able to withstand the pressure of the blood through the body, and also the thick walls can vasoconstrict and vasodilate, and that we look at that in a second because of blood shunting. So blood shunting is when we send blood or redirect blood to an area that needs it most. If I'm training my biceps, for example, then my bicep arteries will vasodilate. They'll get bigger to allow more blood flow to that area, and other parts of my body will vasoconstrict. So in my legs, for example, where there is less blood needed. I've said it's been classed before. That's often what can happen when you train legs hard, especially if you're doing heavy squats, for example. Those heavy squats can make you feel lightheaded because all the blood is rushing to your legs. It's vasodilating the blood to your legs, vasoconstricting blood to your brain. It can make people feel a bit lightheaded. We have capillaries. Capillaries are one cell thick to allow nutrients to pass through. So we have capillaries that go directly into the muscle. The capillaries are one cell thick, allowing the transportation and transfer of oxygen and CO2. So the arteries will take the oxygenated blood to the muscle. The capillaries will transfer that. It will do the swap of oxygen to CO2, and the veins, which we'll look at now, the veins will then take that deoxygenated blood back to the heart and to the lungs to be reoxygenated. Veins, the main things that they have to make them veins, they have thinner walls, because they're working under low pressure. They also have valves. These valves stop the backflow of blood because they're working under lower pressure. And if we didn't have these valves, they would backflow and we wouldn't get it going in the direction we wanted to go into. The last things we need to know, again, on my very, very poor notes that you can't read because they're backwards. I'm not quite sure why that happened. But anyway, we have 4 components of blood. So red blood cells, plasma, white blood cells, and platelets. Red blood cells are important because that's what the oxygen binds to. And that binding of the oxygen then it gets carried to where it needs to go. And without the red blood cells, like the little boats that carry the men, so it's in lessons before. So those red blood cells, through hemoglobin inside the red blood cells, attach oxygen to them and then carry that to the muscles to be used. Plasma. Plasma is the liquid part of the blood, and this is why if you get dehydrated, it's really bad for sports performance because your blood will become thicker, more viscous, meaning it will travel much more slowly to where it needs to go. And basically the plasma is the liquid part of the blood, and that's important why we are hydrated. And we have white blood cells as well. White blood cells fight infection. So again, very, very important in sport because if you get sick, you cannot train, you're going to lose your levels. And so we need white blood cells to be able to do that. And the final part again is platelets. Platelets are carried in the blood. They block, they clot blood wounds, or they clot wounds, stop us bleeding out. All of these things we've got to be able to relate to sport and think about how it helps us in sport. So red blood cells, why are red blood cells important for athletes? Well, athletes or sport require oxygen to be carried to the muscles for us to continue to work at a good level. So if I'm a footballer, for example, I would use red blood cells to be able to maintain my level without getting tired, because obviously I will be carrying oxygen to the muscle, allowing me to work aerobically, and if I'm working aerobically, I continue for a longer period of time. Plasma is important because plasma carries the nutrients and the red blood cells where it needs to go. Why is plasma important in sport? For example, if I'm a basketball player, the plasma is carrying everything that my muscles need to continue my level of performance. If my plasma becomes thicker, more viscous, I'm going to decrease my level of performance because I won't be able to get as much nutrients or as much oxygen to where it needs to go. Why are white blood cells important? As I said before, stops you getting sick. If you get sick, you've got to stop training. Important, for example, a rugby player. If a rugby player gets sick, he will not be able to train and he will lose his level. And then finally, platelets are important. As we said before earlier in the video, platelets are important to clot wounds. If wounds are not clotted, then we will have to stop training. If we have to stop training or stop playing, we are going to maybe lose or not be able to play on the pitch. Also important in sport. That's the general overview of the cardiovascular system. Have a watch of this and hopefully your notes will help that. And the last thing you need to be able to know is through training, how does your cardiovascular system improve? Well, all of these things improve. So you can carry more oxygen, you can carry more nutrients to where it needs to go. Your heart will get stronger and be able to pump more blood per beat. Cardiac output will improve. Stroke volume, which is how much blood you can pump per beat, will improve. Through all these things, we will be able to have a more effective system. Hope this helps, and we will see you soon.